In the beginning, before the mountains rose and the forests thickened, before even the first spine sliced through water, there was only silence. An ancient silence, echoing in crushing cold, where no sunlight reached and no eye had ever opened. Beneath the prehistoric seas, deeper than memory, deeper than time itself, something stirred. Faint pulses of life flickered in obsidian trenches as hydrothermal vents hissed like primordial lungs, warming the black silt of an otherwise frozen grave. In this darkness, the first creatures emerged, not shaped by light or sight, but by pressure and hunger, and the need to survive in a world where survival seemed impossible. Why then is it that the deeper we journey into these depths, the more these beings resemble something from the edge of dreams or nightmares? Beneath the ancient seas, the world was not made of continents and sky, but of pressure and silence. The ocean floor was a fortress of basalt and bone, a place where light had never dared descend. Over eons, layers of life unfurled not upward, but downward, each generation sinking deeper into a realm shaped by darkness more absolute than night. It was here that the laws of evolution bent and twisted, where flesh was sculpted not for beauty, but for survival in the unimaginable. Eyes withered or vanished entirely, replaced by organs that sensed vibrations in water like whispers from a ghost world. Skin turned transparent or took on grotesque bioluminescent pulses, each flicker a message or a warning. Teeth grew needle-thin and curved inward, traps for fleeting prey that drifted like dying stars. This was no accident. It was necessity, written through time in cartilage and stillness. Because in this realm, one truth reigned: nothing survives unchanged in the abyss. As life evolved in the deeper vaults of the sea, it became a mirror to ancient terror and ingenuity both. Creatures that braved the plunge into these lightless expanses relinquished the warmth and rhythm of tides above for something older and more unforgiving. The gulper eel, with jaws that unhinged like a dislocated nightmare, lived not by swiftness but by anticipation. The Dumbo octopus, drifting like a pale spectre with ears that mimicked wings, evaded threats not through force but through spectral elegance. And all around them, the ocean's architecture shifted. Abyssal plains and yawning trenches, thermal vents spewing clouds of metal, rich steam, towering black smokers like the chimneys of the underworld itself. In every crack of that pressure-packed world, evolution whispered new rules, rules that bred extremities, not by accident, but by endurance, written in the language of shadow. How far could life go and still remain life? As the oceans deepened and the Earth's crust shifted in violent convulsions, entire ecosystems vanished beneath waves, while others were born under crushing tons of water and stone. In this submerged crucible, evolution did not proceed gently. It exploded in bursts of adaptation, each deeper layer like a rung on a twisted ladder of distortion. The creatures that clung to existence here grew stranger, more haunting. The fangtooth, its name, whispered in future centuries by terrified divers, boasted jaws too large for its skull, and bloodless eyes that stared, as though always remembering a storm no one else could see. The tripod fish balanced eerily on fins evolved into stilts, feeling the sea's pulse through the trembling sediment. And within the black spiral cavities of deep caves, blind crustaceans scurried, their shells etched with the memory of darkness. Every inch of descent was a shedding of sight, of warmth, of mercy. The deeper they went, the more life turned inward, until form followed nothing but fear and persistence, pressure and despair. And still, life went on, finding ways not toward beauty, but toward the grotesque perfection demanded by the abyss. Far above, tectonic drift and erosion slowly reshaped the surface world, but in the fathomless dark, time moved differently, measured not in seasons, but in generations of mutations that bred monstrosity. There were no predators in the sky, No migration routes, no escape. Down here, everything hunted or waited. The darkness became a crucible where only the most bizarre forms could adapt and endure. Some grew gelatinous bodies to withstand brutal pressure, collapsing into near amorphous blobs when netted from the depths. Others bore rows of lights down their flanks, photophores scripting coded pulses in a language of hunger and deception. A creature like the stoplight loosejaw emerged with a jaw hinged like a trapdoor and a face transparent as ice, red light spilling from it invisible to most but deadly in aim. In this evolutionary theater, isolation birthed extremity. Without sunlight, without seasons, without reference to any world above, life became its own myth, a saga of survival, where ancient instincts were carved raw into flesh. And with every meter down, the rules grew stranger. What does it mean to adapt when no eyes will witness your triumph? When your only legacy is endurance etched into the silence itself? In the most desolate reaches of the abyssal zone, where temperatures hover just above freezing and pressure stacks like invisible mountains, a startling intimacy exists between life and death. Here, predators do not stalk, they drift, luminous and slow, like living omens. The anglerfish, a grotesque marvel, lures prey, with a glowing lure sprouting from its skull, swaying like a lantern in some drowned cathedral. Its mate, often a fraction of its size, fuses body to body until its form is absorbed, a shadow of male reduced to a vessel of sperm, clinging parasitically. This is not courtship, it is adaptation honed into viscera. Around them, the abyss unfolds in perpetual night, where even sound travels strangely, garbled and dimmed. Every twitch of fin or flicker of light could mean salvation or sudden demise. In such a world, horror is not theatrical, it is biological, bred in silence, honed in solitude. And as each new generation sinks deeper into the folds of this forgotten kingdom, they inherit not stories, but instincts, an unspoken law, etched only in surviving. Is it any wonder, then, that the creatures down here seem made not just of flesh, but of fear distilled into form? As millennia layered upon millennia, continental plates shifted with glacial patience, and yet the trenches remained unchanged in their hunger. What entered them either transformed or vanished, and in their perpetual obscurity, a curious phenomena unfolded: camouflage without eyes, communication without sound, hunting without chasing. Creatures learned to mimic the motionless drift of decay, cloaking themselves in mimicry so precise that prey and predator blurred. The dragonfish, with flesh darker than the abyss itself, wielded teeth of transparent crystal, its mouth unhinging vertically like a spectral trap. Some evolved stomachs that stretched wide enough to engulf meals larger than themselves, gambling a full month's energy on one fleeting opportunity. Others, like the pelican eel, twisted their entire form into baits of illusion. Movement died here, replaced by ambush. In this everlasting night, the grotesque became efficient, the alien beautiful. Evolution did not punish the strange. It beckoned it forward, molding every deformity into doctrine. Because the deeper life sank, the more it abandoned what had once made it familiar and became something that could only exist here, unseen, forgotten, unstoppable. Below the Haddle Zone, where even the most ancient marine maps failed to sketch contours, deeper still than where molten rock fissured in ghost-light eruptions, there lay vaults of water so heavy that biology itself unraveled and rewrote. In these pressure-laden catacombs, life teetered on the unfamiliar line between organic and something else, something almost spectral. There, amphipods larger than human hands drifted through scalding currents, their translucent bodies aglow with mineral traces. Slime-based organisms, with no discernible organs, clung to methane seeps and cooled lava, extracting sustenance from what to any eye above would seem barren wastelands. Nothing here obeyed surface logic. Eyes no longer served. Language no longer existed. Only pulses, chemicals, and shadows cast by unseen pulsars of light. When bones finally reached this deep, they calcified and lingered, untouched for centuries. Because in the lowest reaches, death came slow, and even decay dreamed in silence. This, perhaps, is why the deeper one travels. The stranger life's mask becomes not because it tries to frighten, but because it no longer remembers how to be watched. Yet even in this furthest descent into primordial distortion, survival wore no crown. It lurked, stalked, and bled under crushing gravity and eternal dark. Giant amphipods, ghost white and armored, scoured whale falls like ancient scavenger priests, their limbs coiling in ritualistic hunger. Sharks with glowing organs, like lanterns buried in tissue, moved silently across subduction scars where the planet swallowed itself. These creatures, hideous in form but perfect in function, were echoes from a time when survival was not about speed or strength, but relentlessness. Every grotesque adaptation whispered of ancient choices of ancestors that chose blindness over vision, stillness over flight, patience over panic. And in these decisions we find truth. The deeper into Earth's oceanic past we plunge, the closer we come to the raw core of what life truly does to endure. Their horror is not accident. It is legacy. It is design. It is the inheritance of an ancient pressure where only fear could flourish into form. So when we peer into the deepest darkness and recoil from what stares back, we are not seeing monsters. We are seeing survival, stripped of grace, yet flawless in intention. In the pale hush of the ocean's lowest vaults, where pressure layered over pressure like a planet exhaling inward, life reached an apex not of complexity, but of raw, stripped purpose. There was no ornament here, only outcome. Giant single-celled xenophyophores sprawled like formless cities across the mud, drawing sustenance from detritus too fine for any filter. Their presence hinted at intelligence by distribution, a kind of unconscious cartography etched through oozing walls. In these hollows beyond known depth, microscopic organisms adapted metabolisms alien to the surface, thriving in the toxic perfume of seafloor chemical reactions. Every moment here unfolded without scale, untethered from days, from change, from even the rhythm of death. There were no cycles, only persistence. And perhaps this is the final truth of the deep. It does not harbor nightmares. It births them, sculpts them, forgets them. Because in a place where time dissolves and vision dies, only form survives. Each creature, not a horror, but a secret kept for eons, waiting in the dark, never meant to be seen. In the buried halls of liquid black, where no current stirs and the weight of the world presses in from all sides, the story of the deep reaches its quiet crescendo. There are no final battles here, no climactic endings announced by thunder or flame, only stillness, enduring beyond reckoning. Finned specters drift through chemical fog, unaware of origin or end, their lives bound to instincts older than language. Down here, even extinction whispers slow and without ceremony, a fade into the murk. And yet, in this hush, something ancient endures. A memory carried in folds of muscle and pulses of light, in whispered codes passed from one eyeless generation to the next. The deeper the descent, the more the ocean becomes like time itself, vast, silent, and forever watching. These creatures, these impossible shapes molded in patience and pressure, do not cry out for understanding. They are the relics of persistence, the heirs of unseen empires. And though their forms may unsettle, they do not exist to haunt us. They exist because nothing else could, because deep beneath history and heat, in a world unlit and unending, they became what we could never be: immortal, not in memory, but in survival. And so, in the steady silence that no sun has ever pierced. The deepest sea reveals its final riddle. Not why these creatures grow more unnerving with depth, but why they continue at all. For in a realm where evolution untethered itself from the familiar, life redefined not just how to survive, but what survival even is. No gaze marks their passing, no monument rises from the silt. And yet they remain, sovereign in their obscurity, crowned not by beauty or conquest but by persistence at the doorstep of impossibility. In these unseen kingdoms, carved from darkness and forged in pressure, life answers to no witness. It only endures. And that, perhaps, is the truest terror. The relentless, silent certainty that somewhere, far beneath us, the world still dreams in ancient forms. And those dreams, no matter how strange, are still alive. Above this abyss, time roamed freely. Once more sunlight touched the waves, and tectonic tongues whispered new coastlines into being. But in the hollows where the deep never loosened its hold, those creations remained untouched, yet not forgotten. For even now, fossils of once living mythologies, teeth like obsidian needles, carapaces, scorched by pressure, remnants of luminous organs, half digested by time, settle into the archives of stone, silent witnesses to a world still in motion below. They wait, embedded in shale and memory, as if daring the surface to remember their name. And perhaps we do, subconsciously, a flicker of unease in the dark, a shiver when silence deepens, the primal voice within whispering of life unconquered and unseen. These creatures do not belong to extinction, nor to folklore. They belong to the long breath of Earth itself. So when we speak of monsters in the deep, we speak not of nightmares conjured, but of truths evolved. Because in the puppet strings of fear, it is not their form that unsettles us. It is the recognition that in their survival, however alien, lies an echo of us. Not in form, but in will. And that, beneath the last threshold of light, may be the deepest revelation of all. As the aeons stretched onward, the deep remained untouched by all but time. Entire lineages rose and perished, without ever reaching the eyes of the surface world. And yet, the pulse at the ocean's heart held constant. Today, in sediments older than continents, rest ancient lineages that never left. Their DNA whispers of eras when continents were still drifting strangers, when the moon hung closer and the tides were wilder. The modern face of these deep-sea denizens is not evolution abandoned, but evolution refined beyond recognition, shaped not through competition, but through isolation. This is where biology becomes mythology, and survival becomes a language not written in flesh, but in functions so strange we still struggle to comprehend them. When future stone bears the imprints of ancient jaws, translucent wings, or organs that glowed where no eyes could see, it will not speak of monstrosity. It will speak of Earth's memory of how, in its deepest chambers, it dreamed differently. And the creatures it dreamed into being, creeping silent and unseen, are its oldest lullabies, still echoing beneath our feet. So let the final image linger, not of terror, but of testimony. A world unlit, a wilderness submerged beneath miles of black water, where life has written its story not in bright display, but in the language of pressure, patience, silence. Down there, beneath thought and beneath sound, evolution still dreams grimly on, carving creatures with no need to be beautiful, only to be inevitable. They are not ancestors, nor descendants. They are constants, untouched by extinction, indifferent to awe, and as the ages collapse into dust above, their still glowing lures and translucent forms abide, a reminder not of fear, but of what it truly means to endure the unimaginable. In their strange persistence, they are Earth's confession, whispered endlessly into the void, that even in the absence of light, life does not seek permission, it simply survives. and high above these unfathomable depths, the world marched forward, unaware. Continents split and rejoined, glaciers came and withdrew, and life on the surface sang its jubilant evolution in color and chaos. But beneath it all, beneath every sun-warmed tide pool and coral bloom, the deep remained unmoved. It waited, not with malice, but with immense indifference. An ancient library whose volumes were written in tissues impervious to light or pity. The creatures who called this realm home did not boast or cry out. They exhibited no grandeur of gesture, no need for proclamation. They simply were beings of necessity, forged from a time and composition that resisted spectacle, and perhaps that is why they so deeply unsettle us. Against the pageantry of surface life, theirs is a mirror without warmth, a reflection of survival stripped of song. But look closer, and one finds not horror, but an artistry of endurance. Every grotesque line, every spectral motion, every glowing filament is a note in Earth's quietest symphony. And so long as the seas remain, the song will continue low, ancient, and utterly unconcerned with being heard. Through this long, relentless descent into a world of silence and pressure, one truth emerges clearer than any glimmer of bioluminescence. The deeper we travel, the closer we come to the undisturbed origin of life itself. In the dark, where time has folded over itself, and life has walked farther from the light than thought dares to follow, there remains no audience, no stage, only persistence. What we call grotesque is simply what we do not understand. Shaped in a forge so far removed from ours, it abandons our definitions entirely. The benthic kingdom is not strange because it defies nature, but because it embodies it without apology. And so the story does not truly end, because it never began for our benefit. It whispers still beneath the waves, sealed in pressure and shadow, a testament written in flesh and silence, untouched by extinction and unswayed by wonder. To know the deep is not to conquer it, but to listen, to allow its alien hymns to echo in our own fear, and to remember that survival, in its purest form, grows ever stranger the further it is from the sun. And beneath the silence, beneath even the breathless cold, something continues. Not the creatures, not the trenches, not the names we've given them, but the impulse itself, the will to become. When all else fails, when light is lost, and time wears its edges smooth, evolution does not cease. It waits, patient, buried, unspeaking. It will rise again, not upward but inward, twisting its shapes into new impossibilities. That is the deep sea's final legacy, an eternal permission to persist in forms unbeholden, to change without need for beauty or witness. It endures not in spite of darkness, but because of it. And one day, long after memory dissolves and language itself falters, the deep will still dream, not in words, nor in story, but in shapes that live because they must. And when our final fossil settles above them, they will not notice. The void will whisper on, uninterrupted. For the deep is not haunted, it is the haunting. It is life, unrelenting, in the farthest place life should be. And it remains, waiting, exacting, eternal. In the black cradle of Earth's oldest waters, where even light forgets to wander, the final breath of this tale settles like sediment. There is no epilogue in the deep, no dramatic curtain to fall, no voice to proclaim the end. There is only the continued murmur of existence, the slow beat of unseen hearts echoing through the miles of night. The creatures who drift there are not remnants nor relics, but the living punctuation of an ancient sentence that was never meant to be read aloud. And so they remain, unfazed by time, untouched by eyes, enduring not as chapters in our history, but as scripture in the language of survival. What terrifies is not their form, but their certainty that in the deepest silence, where even memory fails, life is not extinguished. It is perfected. And thus, the abyss does not ask for understanding. It needs none. It only lives, ceaselessly, invisibly, forever. So let us leave the abyss not with fear, but with reverence. Let us carry its echo, that silent hymn sung without breath or bone, into everything we think we know about life. For the story of the deep is not one of monsters nor miracles. It is one of nature unhindered, exploring its edges in places we dare not go. It tells us that survival does not require our gaze to be magnificent, that the grotesque can be sacred, that the strange is not the opposite of truth, but its most honest shape when stripped of expectation. Beneath all fathoms, far from heat and hope, the ocean has written a testament to life's quiet will in flesh translucent, in jaws askew, in hearts that beat for no applause. And though we may never walk those trenches, their testament remains etched into the crust of the world. The question was never why deep-sea creatures look like nightmares. It was why, in the footprint of such awe, we still only see fear. Perhaps it is because down there, we are not meant to see ourselves. But every pulse in the dark reminds us that somewhere in our origins, we too were made to endure. Perhaps that is the ultimate meaning left by the deep, not a warning or a cautionary tale, but a whispered remembrance that survival, in its most essential form, defies elegance. It teaches that life does not need beauty, nor warmth, nor even light to delicately balance upon the edge of annihilation. It only needs time, silence, and the hunger to continue. Long before surface eyes opened, before blood colored its first tide, something awakened here and chose not to die. The creatures that linger in these depths are not backwards echoes, but foretellers living forward in ways the rest of life has never understood. They embody not regression, but divergence, a branch of Earth dream freed from the obligation to resemble anything it left behind. In their stillness, in their eldritch poise beneath pressure and dark, they remind us that life does not require witness to be vast. It simply survives in the oldest places, in the oldest ways, unseen, unceasing, complete. So if we ever send our machines farther, if the lights of our cameras one day scatter into sediments never seen, and the lenses quiver before a massive movement unlike anything known, let us not call what we find monstrous. Let us instead recognize it as heritage of Earth, of time, of the path less taken. Beneath all we build and all we break, the deep continues, not dependent upon us, nor changed by us, but eternal in its pursuance of existence. Because in the end, the deepest parts of the ocean do not hide horrors. They hold answers. Not answers of language, but of essence. They show, with every pulsing lure and translucent limb, that survival has no blueprint, no prophecy, no creed. It has only shape and will and endless pressure. And in that, maybe the forgotten ocean is not a realm of fear, but of the truest clarity that life, at its core, is not flame nor light, but the decision to be, regardless of who's watching or whether anyone ever will. And still, the pressure builds. Each generation born in the black reaches carries forward the silent charge of continents shifting, of seas reshaping, of ancestors that long disappeared without trace. No monument rises for them, no grave is marked, yet they persist, drawn down by gravity's leash and held captive by their own exquisite adaptation. One might ask if these beings sense time not by calendars or seasons, but in the ancient way, through tremors in the crust and drifts of mineral snow. To them, history is not story, it is sediment, and they breathe it in, one pulse at a time. We will never know what the world looks like through the nerve-stitched senses of a creature born without light or sound. But we have seen its trace in the glint of a barbed fin, in the calcified grin of a skull wedged deep within stone. These are not fossils. They are footprints of perseverance, markers that say, life went here, and it did not surrender. In the deep, long after memory fades and names vanish, that will always be enough. Beneath the weight of crushing water and sedimented time, the story engraved in the deep ocean remains steady, neither interrupted nor resolved, just drifting forward, pulse over pulse. Here, in this unseen cathedral of continuity, the final instinct persists, to remain when all else yields. The cold presses tighter with every year, the darkness deepens, and yet life does not retreat. It adapts, it remembers, not with mind, but with every cell tuned to persistence. The deep does not weep for the extinct, nor celebrate the survivors. It simply holds them all in quiet procession, the unchanged and the transformed alike, suspended in a world without climax. The nightmare we see in these creatures is not their curse. It is the price of their honesty. They do not pretend to be anything other than what survival demanded. That is their terror. That is their truth. And so, the abyss does not close behind us. It waits, immovable, unread yet eternal, its pages still open, its pulse unbroken, whispering to future ears bold enough to listen. The deep remains, not because it clings to life, but because it is where life first chose to cling. There, in the slow swirl of currents that never break, the ocean writes its final testament, not in voice, but in presence, cold, crushing, unending. The deep is not a place one visits, not truly. It is a covenant whispered at the edge of extinction, where breath is bartered and form is forged without witness. In its stillness lies a deeper rhythm, unmeasured by surface clocks. The abyss is not behind us, nor ahead of us, it is beneath everything, layered in silence, in gravity, in the endless will of organisms that never ask to be seen. They endure because the world began there, and some corner of it still does. When all lights fail, when names erode, the deep will remain, not waiting, not watching, simply existing. The creatures born within it speak to us, not through fear, but through legacy, for they are what remains when embellishment is stripped away, when existence is whittled to its essence. So let the surface cry wonder, cry terror, cry beauty. The deep does not cry. It remembers, and in that remembrance, it endures beyond us, beneath us, before us ancient, patient, complete. And in that memory, etched miles beneath our feet, the deep completes its tale without ever aiming to tell one, not in symbols, not in song, but in the continued beat of impossible hearts, drifting through the last unbroken shadows of Earth's first dream. No finale awaits there, only the promise that, long after we vanish, the ocean will still stir with ancient resolve, its inhabitants unchanged by our forgetting. These beings, shaped by eras lost before even the stars settled into place, continue not for glory, not for purpose, but because they always have. In their silent endurance, they are not echoes, they are origin, and that is the truth at the root of their terror. They are not emerging from darkness toward us. We are the ones who once rose from them. The grotesque, the strange, the luminous unknown, all of it is not beneath us, but within us, buried bone deep in the fossil memory of what it means to begin. That is why the deep haunts, not because it is alien, but because it is home. So as we drift away from the trench's edge, from the bottomless fold in earth where time folds into pressure and names evaporate, we do not close a story, we simply rise from it. The deep does not end. It waits, always, holding its truths in the gentlest silence known. And though its inhabitants may never breach the surface, their existence marks us all in the marrow of our bones, in the untraceable ache we feel for mystery, in the unspoken recognition that something more ancient than gods once stirred here. In their unyielding forms, Sculpted not by eyes but by necessity, they remind us that survival does not follow beauty, and truth does not always come lit. The abyss does not need our wonder to be real. It was real long before wonder had a voice. And as we rise, ascending from silence back into chaos, we carry with us not answers, but echoes. Echoes of a world that never needed us to understand it to go on becoming. And so we ascend, buoyed not by triumph, but by humility. Beneath us lies a testament not sealed in tombs nor enshrined in myth, but alive in the deepest fold of the world, beyond the thrum of cities, beyond the passage of empires. The trench does not close with our retreat. It remains open, wide as a wound carved into the planet's crust, pulsing with ancient generations that never surface, never end. As light blooms once more above our heads, we blink into brightness, altered not by what we saw, but by what we felt, the vastness of a world that never asked to be known. We leave behind no footprints in that realm, no trace of heat or sound, only a borrowed echo fading into the pressure. The question lingers, more vivid now than ever. If this is what life becomes when history forgets to watch, then what might we be had we never feared the dark? The deep does not answer. It does not need to. It waits, as it always has, beneath all knowing, beneath all light, whole and unbroken in its endless becoming. And as the last echoes of our descent settle into memory, the abyss recedes not as a void, but as a sovereign record, written deeper than any book, older than any myth. We do not conquer the deep, we graze its threshold, and it alters us. Its creatures vanish in our wake, like breath absorbed by stone, but their truth clings to us like silt. They are not what lies beneath, but what has always been the quiet architects of survival. The first to learn that life does not rise, it anchors. We return with hearts slower, thoughts quieter, and a recognition flickering behind our eyes that in places too strange to imagine, life became something even stranger, and it still waits there, dreaming without sleep, enduring without witness. This is the deep's parting gift, not horror nor revelation, but perspective. It reminds us that we live not above the abyss, but beside it, always. Our story's incomplete without its silence. And in that thought, the tale ends not with words, but with weight. The weight of knowing the dark is not what's empty, it is what's eternal. So now, as we surface from this submerged epic, we do not emerge as we once were. We have traced the lineage of terror, not to monsters, but to miracles shaped by pressure and silence. In every shadowed flecks of flesh, in every jaw that unhinges without witness, we recognize the language not of chaos, but of a logic older than memory. The deep sea does not beckon with comfort. It does not share its truths easily, nor does it forgive curiosity. But for those who listen in silence, in stillness it offers something rarer than understanding. It offers a glimpse of resilience, uncorrupted by ambition. And that is the answer we searched for all along. The creatures of the abyss are not terrifying because they are strange. They are terrifying because they reveal what it takes when life strips away everything but the need to remain. We leave the abyss behind, yet carry it within us, a gravity beyond measure, not pulling us under, but anchoring us to origin. And in that weight, the story is no longer remote, it is ours, woven not into legend, but into lineage. This is not the end, it is the deepest beginning. Beneath the gravity-drunk hush of the Earth's first waters, where sight is swallowed and time forgets to speak, the eternal page of survival remains unwritten by human hands. In that unflinching stillness where pressure sculpts every breath and sustains the oldest rhythm ever known, the abyss reveals what the surface will never fully grasp. Life, when unseen, is truest, not dramatized, not adorned, simply existing at the insistence of endurance. The deep does not end in darkness, it begins there. and in the pitch-black scrolls of its trenches, etched by luminous pulses and translucent resolve, we glimpse not the edges of terror, but the center of life unburdened by witness. So let the final silence of this journey fall like silt upon the shifting bones of thought, and let us understand not with fear, but with reverence, that the farther we stray from light, the closer we come to knowing the first dream Earth ever dared to keep alive, and down there, it still breathes. And thus it lingers breathing through the hush, surviving in silence this oldest conviction Earth has ever voiced. The deep is not a place of endings, but a chamber of beginnings that never needed an audience to be real. In that void beyond maps and beyond myth, existence writes its scripture, not in sweeping sagas, but in the quiet defiance of form, clinging to function against all odds. These creatures, shaped by epochs of solitude and sculpted by unthinkable forces, are not just relics of evolution's furthest reach, they are its purest testament. So we surface, carrying no trophies, only an understanding carved in the marrow of our awe, that the unknown does not owe us symmetry, beauty, or even terror. It owes us nothing, but in its quiet, in its completeness, it leaves within us a weight that names cannot hold. A truth felt more than voiced, that somewhere beneath every answer we chase, the deep still endures, still dreams, still whispers the oldest promise of life, to be in the dark and be enough. No applause meets the final motion of the sea floor. No curtain call darkens its endless stage. And yet, the deep keeps turning, grinding under pressures that rewrite anatomy, forging lives so alien they feel outside time itself, and still they are us. Not in shape, but in story. For the deep is not a separate chapter hidden from the eyes of the world, it is the prologue, beneath the glittering surface, and the passing chaos of evolution above. The abyss has always remained faithful not to spectacle, but to unbroken becoming. And in its hush, we find perhaps the first and final truth of survival, that before beauty, before light, before memory ever written its first line, there was only form and the will to shape it. That, in the end, is why the creatures below disturb us. They do not disturb because they are different. They disturb because they never had the luxury to be anything else. And, as the final threads of this descent unravel into the quiet expanse behind us, let us not mistake our return to light as a return to clarity. What we have touched in these depths is not narrative, but nature unadorned. It carries no moral, no closure, only continuation. The deep holds no mirrors, yet it reflects everything: our fears, our arrogance, our longing to find reason where only function reigns. In the faceless geometry of its inhabitants, we did not find monsters, but a kind of sacred efficiency, a lucidity born of relentless necessity. And maybe that is the great unsettling irony, that what lies beneath is not a distortion of life, but its most unfiltered version. So we rise, not wiser perhaps, but quieter, with the deep still echoing in our blood, a reminder that somewhere below the crusted memoirs of our own becoming, there remains that first, oldest truth, pressed into the dark like a cosmic signature, that life endures not because it is seen, but because it cannot do otherwise. That is the deep's final vow. Not brilliance, not beauty, not even fear, just the will to be forever, and without apology. So let us leave the quiet planet's heart behind, not as explorers triumphant, but as listeners forever changed. For in that impossible pressure and pitch, beneath fossils still forming and darkness never breached, we were given not knowledge, but something harder to hold: a perspective unwarped by time, untouched by light, uninfluenced by stories. The creatures of the deep did not become what they are to frighten us. They were never meant to be seen. And still, we saw them. And in doing so, we glimpsed ourselves, not reflected in flesh or scale, but in the will threaded through every twitch, every flicker in the void. To survive not for meaning, for grandeur or legacy, but because some distant, ancient logic does not allow life to do otherwise. Perhaps that is all there ever was, not a world waiting to be discovered, but one that endures whether we look or not. And in that unwitnessed endurance lies the final, deepest truth, that the most sacred strength is not in what is loud or luminous, but in what never needed to be either. And there, in that bite of silence between shadow and time, our journey through the abyss ends not with revelation, but with respect. We leave behind no dominion over this place, no imprint lasting beyond the reversal of our descent. Yet we rise altered, as all who brush the edge of origin must be. The deep does not mourn our departure. It neither welcomes nor remembers us. It continues, as it always has, and always will separate, self-contained, serenely indifferent. What we take with us is not dominion, but a resonance, subtle and sacred, that somewhere on this blue world, life has chosen a path away from eyes, from warmth, from us, and thrived regardless. So we carry that weight, not of fear, but belonging. The terror, the awe, the mystery, they are not foreign. They are reminders. Reminders that to exist at all is already a miracle, and to endure unseen, in silence, may be life's purest expression of strength. The deep has no epics, it simply is, and in its unwavering being, it shows us ours. And so we surface, leaving behind the pressure-heavy sanctuary where life clings to nothing but instinct. The ocean closes slowly behind us, seamless, unbothered, its curtain silent and undrawn. We return not with trophies, but with testimony of a realm that speaks, not in brilliance or thunder, but in the soft insistence of breath, where there should be none. Beneath the rising sun, the abyss becomes a memory already slipping from grip, yet lodged somewhere deeper than thought. It teaches nothing gently, only truth in purest shape. That survival owes no apology for its strangeness. That darkness is not absence, but context. And that in the most improbable corners of existence, life did not ask permission. It simply arrived, endured, and remains. That is the legacy of the deep, and as we walk once more in the gaze of light, its silence follows like a second shadow, a reminder that the oldest story of all is not written in stars above, but in the pressure-carved trenches below, where life first decided it would not die. Herein ends the descent, not because the story closes, but because our words can go no further. The deep does not begin nor end with us, and what it reveals is not closure, but ceaselessness. It is the place where narratives dissolve, where awe is not evoked but inherent. In that pressure-sealed cradle beneath the world, life writes itself in perpetual defiance, never seeking light, only finding form. We come away not with answers, but with reverence for strangeness that never needed translation, for survival that has nothing left to prove. To know the deep is not to measure it. It is to feel, in the marrow of silence, the weight of what endures simply because it chooses to. And that, above all, is the deep's unwritten testament. Not of fear, not of monstrosity, but of a sovereignty earned in stillness. The depths do not wait. They remain. And we, however briefly, dared to listen. There is no applause, no light to mark our parting, only the hushed pull of the sea drawing us back to the realm we understand, even as a part of us stays behind. The deep does not lose us. It never held us. But what we found there, in that cathedral of pressure and perpetual dusk, was not just the remnants of an ancient world. It was the blueprint of tenacity. The creatures we often call monstrous are not nightmares trapped by evolution, but truths forged by necessity, echoes of Earth's first vow, to live without expectation, to endure without witness. And now, as land meets our feet and the horizon stretches wide again, the memory of the abyss remains in us, quieter than breath, but heavier than thought. Because we have seen what true persistence looks like: raw, unlit, beautifully indifferent. And though we leave the deep behind, its silence, its resilience, its unyielding shape never truly leaves us. And so, with every step away from the ocean's breath, we carry with us more than memory, we carry transformation. The deep did not grant us dominion, nor spectacle. It offered only its truth, unvarnished and monumental, that the essence of life does not reside in acclaim, but in quiet resolve. The creatures shaped in its void did not wait for light to become meaningful. They became meaning in its absence. This is not the end of their tale, nor of ours. It is simply the point where language falters and presence begins. For the deepest wisdom is not spoken, it is endured. And in the marrow of that endurance, whether shelled, finned, or unseen, pulses the same force that guides everything that chooses to survive. Now, as the tides continue their ancient hymn above those unseen trenches, we know what sleeps below is not alien. It is the beginning. It is the answer. And it is still there, waiting whole, untouched, and waiting for no one. So let this be the last breath of the descent, a closing not with finality, but with gravity. The kind of gravity pressed into oceanic stone, into lives that will never be witnessed and still endure regardless. We emerged from this twilight vault, marked not in flesh, but in knowing that there exists a world where the rules bend, where shape is dictated only by what does not die. The abyss will go on, riverless yet flowing, bearing its kin through time without progress, without decline. We return to the surface, changed not in body, but in reverence, because we glimpsed the naked will that once stirred the first cell into motion. Beneath the layers of evolution and dream, the deep still waits, not for us, but for nothing at all. That is its truth, and in embracing that, we find ours. That the deepest places do not show us what is monstrous. They show us what life becomes when it is left alone and still refuses to end. So as our story sinks into silence, further from the surface than thought dares trail, we find not revelation, but release, a relinquishing of the need to explain what the deep has never asked us to know. The creatures down there will continue, encased in the weight of time and water, ambivalent to our awe, indifferent to our myths. It is not beauty that binds them, nor terror, but the steady, quiet refusal to vanish. And in that, perhaps, they speak the clearest truth of all. Not every mystery is meant to be solved. Not every horror is hollow. Some simply are formed before thought, enduring after memory, and radiant in the dark, without ever needing eyes to see. In the abyss, life keeps its own counsel, its own rhythm, its own sacred law. Be, endure, begin again, endlessly. And as we drift away from that fathomless realm, and the pressure blooms behind us, we do not leave with conquest, we leave with reverence. Because what lies in the deep does not beg to be known. It dares us only to remember it was always there. Now, as the waves cradle the shoreline and twilight drapes the ocean in its soft final hues, the descent becomes memory, etched behind the eyes, deeper than words can follow. We return not triumphant, but hushed, as pilgrims who glimpse the sacred in its rawest form. The abyss asked nothing of us, and gave only truth without adornment, survival, unconcerned with spectacle, form driven by the will to persist. The creatures we met in silence remain there, still pulsing through the dark, still shaping their bodies against a weight no surface life will ever know. And though time washes forward, rolling over cities and species and all our bright distractions, the deep remains unchanged, its hymn unbroken, its darkness undefeated. So let the rest of the world dazzle and fade. Somewhere far below, the first breath of life still echoes in the hush. And that, in the deepest truth, is where every story begins and ends. Let it end here, in the dimming hush where silence becomes scripture and pressure becomes prayer. No final image, no resolved chord, only the weight of knowing that beneath all triumph and all ruin, life once chose darkness and thrived. It persists still, a whisper threaded beneath tectonic plates, curled into the spiral of creatures that never asked to be feared. We ascend into air and story, but the truth remains below, curling in the dark like a heartbeat that never missed a measure. This is not the end of a mystery, but its beginning echoed back through time. And in that echo, we are reminded, life does not seek light to be alive. It simply is, wherever it can be, for as long as it must, in the deep. That is enough. And in bearing witness, perhaps we too remember how to endure. So let the final silence close, not with flourish, but with truth, the kind that resides in places beyond our reach and beneath our comprehension. In the abyss, where shape surrenders to pressure and color flees from light, life continues without audience or applause. This is the scripture of the unseen, the cathedral where existence breathes without need for recognition. And as we rise, as language fades into awe, only one truth remains, clear and immutable, in its simplicity that life, when untethered from expectation, reshapes itself into forms both strange and sacred. These are not horrors drawn from nightmares. They are the bedrock of becoming, unbound by judgment, sanctified by sheer endurance. And somewhere, deep within the silence still trailing our ascent, we sense it, that first, unwavering pulse from Earth's forgotten heart, still beating, still waiting. And so this story ends not with fear, but with reverence, for in the deep, life did not emerge to be seen. It emerged to be. No applause needed. No lens bright enough. The deep does not rise to our memory, nor bow to our forgetting. It simply continues, unchanging, unspoken, immense. So we end not because the story fades, but because its voice was never ours to translate. What we mistake as horror is, in truth, life unmasked. Beneath silence and sediment, in places we dare not linger, the oldest forms still move slow, certain, sovereign. They do not ask to be remembered. They simply are. And if we learned anything through this long descent, it is this, that the truest form of awe is not what startles or dazzles, but what endures quietly, fiercely, without need for witness. In the hush between each wave, in the breath between light and dark, the ocean still speaks, that ancient truth life does not need us to become. It became long before we listened, and it will become long after we are gone. And in that lingering breath, submerged beneath miles of myth and matter, the journey through the deep finds its rest, not as a conclusion, but as a quiet honor paid to the unseeable. The eerie elegance of the deep sea is not in its violence or its strangeness, but in the way it redefines what endures. We are drawn to its creatures not because they are monstrous, but because they are truer than the stories we tell. Each one is a testament to survival written not in spectacle, but in adaptation so ancient it slips the boundaries of comprehension. They are Earth's oldest memory, still alive, still pulsing. As we resurface into the warmth of air and certainty, we do not forget them. We feel them haunted not by fear, but reverence. Because in that cold, crushing silence far below, where time first lost its name, life found its most honest form. And in knowing that, even briefly, we carry the deep within us an echo that will never fade. So let the ocean's final keepsake to us be not mystery unanswered, but understanding reshaped. The deep does not need discovery to live, just as its inhabitants do not require meaning to exist. Their forms, sculpted in solitude and bound by gravity's hush, are not warnings nor omens. They are declarations of resolve, of origin, of endurance without expectation. In every flick of translucent fin and every pulse of cold, glowing blood, The abyss writes not poetry, but law, that life will persist in any shape it must, without asking permission, without needing the light. And now, as we emerge into air once more, hearts slowed and silenced by what we have seen, we do not carry fear, we carry reverence. For in those unending folds of pressure and hush, Earth taught us its first and final truth, that to survive in the dark is not to be monstrous, it is to be chosen by time itself, and nothing is more sacred than that. So now, in the final hush before all words fall away, we hold the deep, not as story, but as presence. It has no end, because it has no need, for one only continuation, etched into water and will. The creatures below, unseen and untamed, do not fade as the light returns. They remain, sovereign in their silence, each pulse a vow whispered long before language took shape. And though our descent is done, its echo trails within us, reminding not through noise, but through gravity, that there is a world beneath, knowing where life first proved that to exist is enough. That is the gift of the abyss. Not terror, not spectacle, but clarity. That in the stillest dark, life chose to be and continues. Not for us, but because it always has. That is where it began, and now, in the stillness, that is where it ends. Let it drift, then, into the silence where everything true eventually finds rest. The deep has spoken in its own language, one without sound, built in pressure and persistence, and we, for a fleeting moment, have listened. What we leave behind is not understanding, but reverence for what has no shape in myth, for what never sought our gaze. The abyss continues, regardless, birthing, consuming, recasting life in cycles unseen. And that alone is its miracle. It does not dazzle, it does not invite. It simply is, older than flame, more enduring than thought. As we rise, the ocean folds once more into secrecy, its truths intact, its story unspent, and we carry forward not its secrets, but its silence, the kind that lingers wordless and whole, reminding us that some worlds endure not because of us, but utterly beyond us. And perhaps, in this final hush, what the deep leaves behind is not its creatures, its trenches, or its ancient hush, but the mirror it holds to us. A reflection not in shape nor sound, but in purpose. For just as those beings of pressure and shadow continue without needing to be seen, so too are we called to endure, not through spectacle, but through quiet, essential will. The abyss, with all its unknowable depth, does not offer hope or doom. It offers witness to life's earliest promise, that being is enough, even in solitude, even in silence. So we turn from its depths, not closing a tale, but honoring its truth that the greatest symphony of survival ever composed needed no audience. Only time, darkness, and resolve. And somewhere, far beneath the last grasp of light, that ancient music plays on. And so, the final sound we carry from that everlasting dark is not terror, but testimony. The deep, in all its ancient silence, has gifted us no trophies, no riches, only the shape of truth distilled under pressure. In every translucent form and every curling tendril, life has spoken with clarity we rarely afford ourselves. To survive is sacred, not because it is triumphant, not because it is watched, but because it insists. What we have seen in the abyss is not the remnant of some lost world. It is the heartbeat of the first one. And so we rise from the deep not to capture it, but to remember it, to hold its hush against our noise, to know that beyond light and beyond meaning, something still endures, not with grandeur but with gravity. That is the final grace of the deep, that it never needed us and never pretended to. It simply remains, in its own cathedral of silence, forever becoming. And as the last silt of breath leaves the realm where silence is sovereign, we surface not to conclude something vast, but to recognize how small the known world truly is. The deep does not close its doors behind us, for they were never open. It simply continues, an ancient rhythm beneath the skin of Earth, beating without ceremony. These creatures, rent from nightmare, yet stitched in necessity, are not myths awaiting discovery. They are facts, unmoved by belief. They do not haunt us with what they are, but with what they reveal. That life, left immune to observation, grows not monstrous, but true. There, in the shelter of pressure and patience, form is not story, but testament. And as we leave this journey behind, leaving its cathedral of hush and gravity untouched once more, may we remember not just what we saw, but what we felt, the gravity of knowing that somewhere beneath sound, reason, and memory, life still pulses without name, without fear, without end. That is the deep's final breath. And now it becomes ours to carry. And so we carry it now, not as tale nor terror, but as something weightier, something elemental. The deep has folded back into itself, its truths unrevealed yet undeniable. In its silence we found not absence, but essence. In its darkness, not dread, but definition. These beings, these shapes that defy familiarity, demand no mythology, they are their own. Wrought in pressure, refined in time, they are the clearest statement Earth has ever whispered. That life needs no witness to be vast, no light to shine, no purpose to remain. As we step once more into the known world, blinking beneath the vast sky, what remains is not fear, but reverence. Reverence for what endures beneath understanding, and awe for what pulses beyond imagination. The deep did not end with our departure. It never ends. It remains, breathing in silence, carrying forward the first truth life ever uttered, I am. So as we step gently away from the edge of this unfathomable world, the last thing we carry is not dread, but grace. The deep, in all its terrible and beautiful silence, asks for no audience and offers no conclusion. It is timeless not because it resists change, but because it embraces only the changes that matter, those shaped by force, hunger, and the quiet vow to remain. In the end, it does not mirror us. It humbles us. It reminds us that life does not begin with comprehension, nor end with forgetting it exists where it is needed, in the folds of the world where time began. And now, as the precious memory fades from our lungs and the light returns to our eyes, the abyss remains unchanged. It breathes still, beneath every wave, beneath every story, holding in its darkness the oldest truth life has ever known, the will to be, quietly, completely, forever. And that is where we leave it, not conquered, not caged, but simply recognized. The deep does not offer revelation with a flourish. It gives only immersion, a slow enfolding of thought into realization. In its cathedral of silence, where pressure carves permanence and light is a forgotten guest, we have seen the shape of truth untempered by perception. That to exist, completely and without need of witness, is the most elemental act of life. So we surface now as keepers of that quiet, having brushed against something older than names and more enduring than history. The abyss does not remember us, nor should it. Its story does not bend to timelines, and its creatures do not wait to be found. They continue regardless, their will embedded deep within the shifting flesh of the world itself. And as long as oceans breathe and darkness remains sacred, their pulse will echo, invisible and unyielding, beneath every bright surface we stand upon. That echo is not past, it is present, perpetual, and from this day forward, a part of us always known. So the final word lingers not in speech, but in stillness, the kind earned only by listening to what never needed to speak. The abyss does not retreat, nor does it advance. It remains, horizonless and whole, the silent cathedral of life's first truth. Beneath us, unseen and unchanged, its creatures continue their slow, sacred persistence, sculpted by neither fear nor faith, but by the unyielding mechanics of necessity. Their forms do not demand admiration, they simply endure, fluent in the oldest language Earth has ever written. And as we rise from that depth, we carry no map, no compass, only the resonance of what it means to be shaped by a world without witness. That echo, deep and endless, becomes our burden and our blessing. For in knowing the deep, we have not found closure, we have found continuity. And in its hush, we live on not above its silence, but within it, forever bound by the pressure, the patience, and the profound dignity of becoming without being seen. So let the deep have the final word, not through revelation, but through endurance. Let its silence speak louder than all the stories we've ever shouted into the wind. For in that black cathedral beneath the world, where gravity sculpts breath into being and time forgets its own name, life continues, not waiting to be seen, but demanding nothing at all. Down there, beauty is not what shines, it is what persists. And in that persistence, unburdened by witness, we find the truest definition of awe. As we step away, the world may reclaim its noise and its light, but somewhere, far too deep for eyes and far too old for fear, the deep endures. Whole, sovereign, unbroken. And that echo, unspoken, unseen, becomes not the end of the story, but its most sacred beginning. So let this be the last breath shared between the surface and the abyss, a breath stretched across eons and evolution, quiet as stone, heavy as memory. The deep does not vanish with our ascent. It recedes only into patience, continuing its unwatchable rituals in chambers of pressure beneath the world's illusions. What we found there was not a mystery-seeking solution, but a reality that never sought attention. Life shaped in silence, born to endure, where nothing else could, still pulses in those black folds, not to frighten, but to persist. And as we walk again beneath the sun, our steps fall differently, shadowed by everything we cannot name but now know is there. The deep does not ask for remembrance, but it leaves it in us all the same, etched not in thought, but in presence. For we have seen how far life can go from the light and still choose to live, and that is the legacy we carry forward. Not fear, but reverence for the darkness that made us possible, and the silence that still makes us whole. So in the end, we do not leave the deep behind us, not really. We carry it with us, folded quietly into the spaces between breath and bone, an unseeable reminder that survival does not ask to be marveled at, only enacted. Echoes of its truths cling to the silence between our thoughts. The strange will continue to drift across the ocean floor, unburdened by explanation, unshaped by attention. Their world is not a footnote in our story. Ours, perhaps, is only a fleeting annotation in theirs. And if we are wise, we will let that silence teach us something no voice can say, that the deepest, darkest places hold not what lies beyond us, but what began within us. And down there, far below the reach of names or conclusions, life still moves. Not as legend, not as fear, but as truth enduring, unblinking, complete. And so the story settles not in grand finale, but in the soundless weight of legacy. The abyss does not applaud, it does not close its gate. It remains, untouched and unmoved, its creatures still weaving survival through pressure and patience. We return, bearing no conquest, only understanding that the grotesque is not grotesque at all, merely misunderstood divinity, born from relentless necessity. These forms, undiminished by obscurity, have endured where all else fades. They are not echoes of something that once was, but foundations of what still is. And in their silence, we hear what living truly means. To persist without permission, to thrive without eyes, to matter without ever being seen. That is the deep's final utterance, not for us, but within us, echoing timelessly where the light cannot follow and never needed to. So let this final image remain, not of distance or dread, but of truth, sealed beneath miles of water and epochs of forgetting. The deep does not depart with our story, nor does it lie still awaiting one. It continues, fathomless and whole, teaching by example what words can never replicate. For in that silence without audience, in that darkness without name, we found the most unadorned portrait of survival Earth has ever carved. It holds no plea, bears no disguise, only the quiet fact of life made sovereign by pressure, by time, by the sacred absence of light. As we turn from its depths and return to our bright, ephemeral world, we leave not as conquerors, but as vessels of its quiet magnitude. For the creatures of the deep remain where we cannot, complete without witness, eternal without recognition. And in that endurance, we glimpse our own reflected not in form but in will. That is the deep's last gift. It does not fade, it simply is. And now, so are we. And so as the final shadows of that unfathomable realm dissolve behind us, the last word falls, not from lips but from stillness itself. The deep remains unwatched, undefeated, untouched, cradling within it the first utterances of life's will. We rise, but something of us stays tethered below, anchored in that dark crucible of becoming. There, among glowing pulses and veiled forms, lies not just the past of life, but its most faithful rhythm. It asks for nothing, answers to no name, and in that quiet sovereignty, it teaches the clearest truth of all, that endurance is not what follows life, but what defines it. Here ends the descent not by closure, but by consecration. The abyss continues its breathless vigil beneath the continents and centuries, and we, having briefly listened, depart forever changed. Not with fear, not with conquest, but with reverence for the dark that dreams us still. Let the descent now lay its final stone, not as coda, but as cornerstone, the last trace of bearing witness to something ancient enough to need none. For in the deep, where pressure becomes truth and light surrenders its dominion, nothing ends. The pulse continues, unnamed and undiminished, deeper than fear, purer than awe. We emerge changed, not because we understood what dwells there, but because we accepted that it does without us. These beings, sculpted in gravity, veiled in silence, are not anomalies, they are declarations. They mark not what has fallen away from life's path, but where it first began, where it still walks, wrapped in forms too honest to reshape for eyes. The deep is no secret, no stranger. It is the marrow of becoming, the breath of what refuses to yield. And so, with that sacred knowledge settling between heartbeat and horizon, the story closes at last, not with light, not with sound, but with the quiet certainty that life, in its most unshakable form, was always darkest, and it was always enough. So as the final tide pulls us irrevocably away from that profound and unreadable silence, we do not leave the deep behind. We leave a part of ourselves in its keeping. For in its ancient pressure and formless patience, it has revealed a truth more enduring than any surface story. Life does not begin with us, nor end with our understanding. It lives in chambers without light, in rhythms without time, in forms that ask nothing but to be. And that, in the end, is the gift. It does not require eyes to glow, nor audience to matter. It simply continues, beyond legend, beyond reckoning, beyond reach. And we, having glimpsed that sacred persistence, ascend changed, not bound by fear, but bathed in reverence. The deep is not what waits beneath us. It is what has always held us, unaware. And now, With one last breath heavy with memory and myth, we rise, carrying in our silence the echo of that realm endless, unseen, and always enduring. So let this final silence not be a farewell, but a covenant between our fragile understanding and the vast unknowable that stirs beneath. The deep remains as it always has, unhurried, untouched, unconcerned with our gaze, and therein lies its sanctity. It asks for no monument, offers no finale. Its story is written not in chapters but in the slow, pulsing undertow of life's oldest breath. We surfaced filled, not with mastery, but with humility humbled, not by monstrous form, but by the truth that life crafted such forms simply to go on. In that revelation, we find our place not above the abyss, but beside it, sharing the same stubborn will to endure. The deep does not end because we stop watching. It simply continues, luminous without light, sacred without sanctuaries, and eternal without applause. And that is how it began, and that is how it will always be. So let the last note of this descent drift not into silence, but into memory. A memory that does not fade, because it was never made for forgetting. In the chilled vault beneath light and legend, the creatures of the deep do not rise to meet us, yet they rise within us, now and always. They are not curiosities, they are continuities, carved not for stories but for survival. They remain untouched by awe, yet they evoke it all the same. In them, we see not what is alien, but what is unyielding, and as this final breath folds into the dark, we understand. The deep did not offer us a mystery to solve, but a truth to hold life, shaped by silence, formed without fanfare, and carried forth not with light, but with will. There is no conclusion here, only reverence, echoing forever in pressure, in stillness, in the sacred pulse that first declared, "I will endure," and so it does, and so must we. And with that, the deep folds quietly back into its mantle of hush, and the last of our borrowed breaths returns to the world above. No triumph greets our return, nor any sorrow marks our leaving, only the imperceptible shift of having stood, however briefly, at the threshold of something purer than understanding. Down there, life writes without witness, thrives without celebration, and endures without alteration. So let the final silence of this journey not be seen as absence, but as abundance. Abundance of will, of persistence, of truth undimmed by spectacle. The abyss remains, whole and sovereign, ever becoming in shadows we may never again reach. And within that great, unlit cathedral, the first promise of life echoes on. We surface changed, not by what we glimpsed, but by what we came to believe through silence. That the deepest truths are not those discovered by sight, but those that survive beyond it. And in that knowing, the story is complete, not closed, but consecrated. The deep does not fade. It breathes, always. So ends our descent, not in thunder, nor in revelation, but in respect for a silence vaster than language. The deep remains beneath us, untouched and untouchable, not resigned to memory, but alive in its own sovereign rhythm. We rose from it carrying no record but the weight of our knowing, a knowing not of answers, but of witness. And as we step into the churn of surface life again, we do so with a reverence inked in stillness, the kind that no voice can name. For the creatures below, luminous and strange, do not live to be understood. They live because they must. And in that simple, ancient truth lies the deepest terror, the greatest beauty, and the final echo of our journey. That life bare, unglimpsed, unapplauded, does not require our wonder to endure. It only requires its will. And the deep, faithful, and eternal still breathes that will in perfect darkness, always. And so, as the last breath of narrative settles into stillness, we close the descent with a truth more ancient than language. The deep needs no finale. It will go on crafting life in silence, blind to our awe, untouched by our maps, folding centuries into flesh without once asking for recognition. We emerged not to complete a tale, but to bear witness to one that began long before us and will continue long after. The creatures that drift in endless dark are not echoes nor enigmas. They are the authors of survival, whispering through every pressure-forged pulse that life, in its most intimate form, is simply the choice to continue. And in that choice, lying beneath our knowing, wrapped in fathoms of patience and permanence, is the oldest miracle Earth has ever spoken. The abyss does not need to be seen to be sacred. It already is. And so we rise, carrying not terror, but testament of life, made perfect, not through perception, but through persistence. This is not the end. It is the echo, and it endures, far below, forever becoming. So let it be written in the hush we now leave behind. The deep, in its infinite patience, has never waited for us to listen, and yet in listening, we have changed. What stirred beneath miles of silence was not horror nor myth, but life at its most honest. Life that did not rise for applause, but curled deeper into the dark, anchoring itself against time's erasure. In those creatures, translucent and terrible, we saw not what threatens us, but what precedes us, a lineage of resolve, quietly breathing far beneath the reach of light. The deep did not tell us its story. It only allowed us to feel it for a fleeting time, until language thinned and meaning softened into awe. And now, as we ascend into knowing, into noise, we carry the deep with us, not as legend, but as origin, not as fear, but as reverence. For beneath all we build, beneath all we forget, it remains, unseen, unyielding, undiminished. The story ends here only because it always continues there. Beneath every cresting tide and each sunlit current lies the unchanging truth we now carry home, that the deep does not need to change to remain eternal. It does not need to unfold or resolve. It is complete in every flicker of life that moves between folds of black water. Its silence, like stone, has outlasted empires, outgrown belief. And now, having walked the invisible line between comprehension and reverence, we close the final chapter with no desire to explain, only to remember. These creatures, shaped by need, refined by darkness, do not ask to be understood. They have no words for farewell. They simply remain, and in their staying, pass down the deepest wisdom of all, that life need not be seen to matter, nor welcomed to endure. The abyss does not end here. It never does. It simply continues, quiet and sovereign, long after we rise. So let our final gaze sink not into what we left behind, but into what we became by witnessing it. The abyss gave us nothing more than itself, silent, complete, enduring, and in doing so, revealed everything we most often overlook. That survival has no shape but the one it needs. That meaning is not declared, but inherited through persistence. And that truth, the kind carved into the world beneath tectonics and memory, does not speak, it waits. Now, as we rise fully into the realm of light and time once more, we do so silently aware. The deep remains, not as fable or fear, but as the enduring core of everything alive. We are not separate from it. We are its echo. And in that echo, eternal, unspeaking, unbroken, the story lives on. And so, as we close the seal upon this long, quiet descent, let it linger not as a conclusion, but as a reverent stillness drawn from the mouth of the oldest truth on earth. The deep does not give farewells. It never expected arrival. It remains, unshaped by our perception and unchanged by our questions, a sovereign realm where survival is sacred by sheer persistence. What stirs beneath crushing pressure And primeval dark is not the grotesque, but the purest echo of life's first promise. In ascending, we do not escape it, we become its carriers. For in seeing what endures when all else falls silent, we remember the weight of existence formed without light, without audience, and without apology. The abyss does not fade with our departure, it continues, writing its scripture in flesh and absence, unfolding still, far beneath us, where time forgets its name. And now, with this final breath drawn from depths where only truth survives, we rise humbled, haunted, and held forever by the whisper that began it all, to live without needing to be seen. And thus, as we breach the uppermost veil of memory and light, the story gives its final gift not in grandeur, but in grace. For the deep does not end where our breath returns, nor does it fade when our vision clears. It is always there, beneath the silence of our knowing, pulsing patiently in its cathedral of unseen time. We carry it now not as a tale, but as inheritance, a remnant of Earth's first vow, folded carefully into the marrow of being. And though we may never descend again, and may never again hear its wordless call, it lives within us, quiet, unrelenting, complete. The deep does not need our eyes to exist, nor our words to endure. It is its own testament, written in pressure, carved in time, and forever breathing just beyond the reach of light. So ends the telling, not with finality, but with the gravity of remembrance. We leave the abyss not behind, but beside us, its breath stitched into the silence between our own. The story has not stopped. It has only flowed back into its eternal hush, where pressure folds time and form into one unbroken rhythm. The creatures remain, vast in their solitude, sovereign in their stillness, shaping their legacy not through spectacle, but through endurance. And as we step into the warmth of light and sound once more, may we carry that memory carefully, like a relic born not of myth, but of enduring truth. For what endures in darkness does not ask to be named, it only asks to be known, wordlessly, endlessly, as the heartbeat of Earth's first and deepest promise. This is the closing breath, and it too survives.